We got our mic going? Okay, today we are going to do a kind of an activity sort of up front rather than doing it in the later part like we normally do. So just kind of get ready here. Get your pens out, if you got one, or a pencil out, and open up to Genesis chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25. Okay, Genesis 25. Now, we're going to give you a little bit of a recount here. Last lesson, we ended up talking about Isaac and Rebekah marrying and how that was all worked out, even God being involved in the process of finding the right wife for Isaac. If we remember that the servant went to go and get the wife for Isaac from a foreign land, went all the way back to Padan Aram to go retrieve her. She was from Abraham's family that had been left there in that area. And he prays in the process. And what was the prayer? How was the prayer request asked? Anybody remember? To guarantee who the wife is, water him and the camels, yeah. If he asked for water, that she would not only give him water, but give his camels water, 10 camels. And it appears that Rebekah seemed to recognize God's call because she was immediately ready to respond and go away, and basically, for the most part, probably leave her family never to see them again, or very, very, very infrequent or unfrequent, is that the right word? To not ever see them again because of the distance and the fact you don't have social media and you don't have, phones and that kind of stuff. So, how old was Isaac whenever he was married? Remember his age? 40. And does anybody remember how long they waited? They waited not 40, 20 years of waiting before they ended up having a child. So they had quite a long distance of wait as well, didn't they? Does this sound similar to what we've seen before? Abraham had to wait 25 years for a child. And we're going to find out here today that Rebekah is barren, just like Sarah was. So that's going to add an interesting thing. It's almost like the Lord is delaying, even though He's intending to promise that this is the child's going to come through this and the Messiah line's going to come through this. There's just this delay that keeps happening over and over and over. And that's the way God works. That He makes promises, but He doesn't just make them the day before they're going to be fulfilled most of the time. You get that? It's usually He makes promises years and years and years before they'll be fulfilled. And that's exactly what we see play out. By the way, how old was Abraham when he died? Anybody got an idea? Well, he's going to die here soon. 175. Did you look that up? Remember reading it? Good. 175 years. Rarity now, right? Actually, never happens now, right? But it was a time, they were still close to the time of Babel and the time of the flood. We're a couple thousand years removed from the time of the flood, or I said from the time of creation. We're about, what are we looking at? How far distance was it from Babel? It's 1,000 plus years removed. So they're not living up to the 900 years as you see in the Genesis 4 and Genesis 5 accounts, but they are living long still, at least for our time, right? And they will, and it mentions there, in fact, go over to Genesis 25, verse 7, and let's read that real quick, because that's where it is. It says, "These are the days of the years of Abraham's life, which he had lived, 115 years. Then Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man, full of years, and was gathered to his people." It's kind of like a triple statement of how old he was. Good old age, full of years, an old man. So He's living a long time. But today what we're going to do, or we're going to look at what's called the princes of Abraham. And I'm going to kind of help you through this. But what we want to do in this part of our activity, if you take this and pass it around, don't do anything yet. I'm going to kind of give you an idea how to do it. We're going to trace out the fact that Abraham had 3 sets of families that came out of him. 3 sets of families. Give me what the families are so far we've looked at. Isaac and Ishmael, so that's 2 sets of families. So Isaac has a family line that becomes what? The Israelites, right? And yeah, the promised line. And Ishmael has a whole family, and he's got actually, we already read it when Hagar fled, that he's going to have 12 princes that are going to come out of him as well. So we got a royal line that comes out of the Ishmaelites, as we will see. And then there's another family line that's going to come out of that we will find here in just right at the beginning of the chapter. And this is the line of Keturah that comes through the people of, or Keturah, which is Abraham's concubine. After Sarah dies, I don't know if he remarries or this is one that was part of the family. I don't know exactly how the situation worked out. Huh? He took her wife, but she's called a concubine as well. So she might have been one of Sarah's handmaidens. I don't know. We're just not told for sure where she comes from. And he ends up having several children through her. I mean, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wait, hold on a second. Yeah. Let me count it out again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, you're right. Six names that come out of that one. So has quite a bit of children right in the last few years before he dies. And we're not going to look at all of them, but there are some family, national lines that do come out of that family even. Let me give you an example. The name Midian is one of them. Anybody ever heard of the Midianites? Yeah, they're a big one. Or we'll see Sheba comes out of there. Anybody ever remember Sheba? Remember the Queen of Sheba? And that's going to come out of an Abraham line. So interesting to note some of the history that comes out of these 3 families. So what I want to do, or want you to do here in the activity, is we're going to look at the grandsons of Abraham. And you've got 20 grandsons. You could keep going down and do great-grandsons, at least under some of the lines that come out of Keturah. But what we're going to do here is show the connection. Make it like a family tree. You'd have Abraham. You can put A there. You got Sarah. And then you got Hagar. And what you're going to want to do is to show the connections between what happens out of those lines. Okay? And then you also have Keturah that's going to play in there as well. So you got another set of lines. So you're going to have to give some space for things. And I'll help you. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. Work through if you look right there at Genesis chapter number 25, 1 through 6, and then 12 through 18, you're going to see all the names you need. Okay? Okay, so Abraham and Sarah, what do we know? Let's just do it right here. We got Isaac, right? Okay, and then you got Isaac ends up marrying Rebekah. Okay, we got Ishmael up here. This can be a little hard. I'm going to have to just kind of change it a little bit. But you're going to have to kind of connect the names. See if you can if you want to do it this way where you have things kind of blending out like that, that's fine as well. Just make it to match for your understanding of what it would be, okay? And so you got Rebekah, and then Rebekah's we're going to find out they have 2 that's going to come out of that. Hagar, as we know, has who? Ishmael. Okay, so you got to get the idea, and then Keturah's got 6 that come out of that. All right, so go ahead and read your notes there. Genesis 25. Oh, here, there's a couple that have come in. Give them here. And do your best to fill it out. Okay, I'll be back in just a minute.
draw this a little better for you guys so you can have something to look at if you don't get it. But I'll let you do it on your own for a little bit first. Ishmael's got 12, so you got to kind of give a lot of space for 12 here. You need to participate. That's not participating. Get working. All right, I didn't do two great grandsons. I did grandsons at the length, but if you go under Keturah, it does give us some great grandsons if you follow that. Yeah, they're just connecting the difference between being the children of Sarah or the children of Hagar. So it is interesting that out of Abraham's family, many of the nations actually, when it talks about him being the father of many nations, that's even in a physical way being fulfilled, right? Huh? Kids and more kids. Okay, I'll give you mine here. I'll let you see it so we're not running out of time. I connected it there. You might need to maybe see it up high. I don't know. But we'll do it this way, and I'll put it back down if you have to look at it. But so I got between Abraham and Sarah, we got Isaac. Between Abraham and Keturah, you got all these: Zimram, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. And there, as you look in the list, it also takes a few of these and gives grandson and great-grandsons out of that. Then you got out of between Hagar, you got Ishmael, and then you got the 12 names of the Ishmaelites that come out of there. And what we're going to look at today, between Isaac and Rebekah, you got Jacob and Esau. Or Esau and Jacob, actually, as it's done in order there. Right? Because which one's born first? Esau. Okay? So there you go. That's kind of an idea of how that looks. Now let's look at those questions. It doesn't list the Ishmael's wife. So let's look at the questions. I did kind of already ask one of them, and Bill answered a few of them. Do you recognize any of the names in the list of the future that would become future societies? Out of the Keturah, what did we see? You had Midian, and you got Shua. There's another one that might stand out in there. Sheba was one of them. Let's see. I think there might be another one in here. Seems like I had it marked out. Sarah, give her maidservants. Let's see. So you got Sheba, Midian, and Kedar. Kedar obviously is one of the grandsons, but you got Midian is the one that we got out of this line, which become the Midianites. Sheba, the people of Sheba, that we'll see in the days of Solomon. And then Kedar, which I'm not really sure where that is, but they put that as a significant one. Anybody got an idea where that is? Does anyone have Bible notes on any of those passages in some of your little study Bibles? Any thoughts on that? Okay. All right, well, there's that. Okay, so do you notice about the number of sons descended from Ishmael compared to Genesis 17:20? If you remember, Genesis 17:20 is where God made the promise to Hagar. What was the promise? That he would have 12 princes come out of him. So is God fulfilling that promise? Yeah, he's fulfilling that promise. I do think it's interesting that out of Abraham's line, you got 12 tribes through Isaac's family, and then you've got, out of Ishmael's family, you got 12 princes. I think that's just an interesting connection there that's going on. I'm not sure the significance between the two, why that is, but that is interesting that does happen. And then the third question, what is confirmed in these passages about the significance of Isaac and his inheritance? Did you notice what Abraham did with the people of Keturah? What did he do? They wouldn't fight with Isaac for inheritance reasons, right? Is this the first time he has sent family members away? He did that with Ishmael too, didn't he? And that was kind of at the leadership of Sarah, because she was seeing how Ishmael was treating Isaac, and God backed that up. And now Abraham, you don't even get the idea that Abraham had to ask the question, should I send these away? It's almost like he understands that the promise is in Isaac, not in anybody else. Yeah. Well, it's not favoritism, it's the fact that God is intending to bless through this one line. And it didn't say that he kicked them out with nothing. It says he gave them gifts and sent them away, right?
But the idea is that that there's not going to be any rivalry, and Abraham's securing that so that when he's gone, there is no rivalry. He's made it very clear. Isaac is the one through this line. Now, are we looking at land promises? Are we looking at all that kind of stuff? What's the promise we're looking at? What's the major reason why he's doing what he's doing? That the Messiah comes through this line, and there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt. You don't go, well, Ishmael might get it. You know one of the issues you've seen among the people that are what we'd call the Muslim people today, a lot of them come out of the line of Ishmael. They actually trace their heritage all the way back to Ishmael. Not all of them, but some do. They'll say, actually, we're the firstborn of Abraham. And they argue over they being the people of the promise. They, to this very day, do that. Argue that. Or, obviously, you don't hear about that with these people. But could you imagine if they stayed along? The other battles that would come out of that? Yeah, so you get the point what is happening here. It's to leave no room for doubt. We know where the line of the Messiah is supposed to come from. It's coming through Isaac's line, okay? All right. Well, let's go on. We're going to do some other activity. Look at chapter 25 now, and we're going to really just stay in this chapter, even though we're going to kind of do a little bit of jumping around, but we're going to primarily stay in this chapter for the text that we're looking at. 19 to 28 we're going to read. 25, 19 to 28. So if I get somebody who'll do 19 to 25, Bill, and then 26 to 28. 26, 27, 28. You three right here. Be ready to read. Read loud too, okay? Okay, 26.
And after that came his brother Adam, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob, and Isaac was there 80 years old when she bare him.
Okay, so see, how old is he? He's 60. So how old was he when he got married? 40. How many years have gone by? 20. Okay, next. Okay. All right. So I think you probably know the answer, but what does it mean to be barren when it says Rebekah is barren? Not able to have children, just like her mother-in-law would have been, right? Or was in that condition for so long. What's Isaac's response to her barrenness? Yeah, he turned to the Lord for an answer. Again, he understands God's made a promise, but why are you not fulfilling the promise? I mean, we get to that same question sometimes in our own life when we know what God's promised for believers, and you're saying, God, why are you not bringing this to pass? How about this? We know that the Bible says that the gospel is the power of God into salvation, and then you ask the question, I've given people the gospel, why won't they get saved? Is that not a question that we might ask at times? It's the same kind of principle, isn't it? That God says, I'm gonna save people when you give the gospel to people, and then you say, but I've given the gospel to hundreds of people, and yet they haven't gotten it. You know, I have. I know I have. And yet you wonder what's happening, Lord. Why won't we see more people be saved? Because that's how God works. It's not our time. It's not our
We're not running the show, He is. And we just let Him take it in His time. And when you see passages like this in the Scripture, where you see God made a promise a long time before it ever came to pass, it just kind of gives you a bit of encouragement to know that you're not the first person to feel that way. To feel like God has forgotten what He said He would do. But our job is just to trust Him and be faithful. His job is to fulfill what He said He would fulfill in His time. Does that make sense? Okay. This is an interesting thing. What does this tell us about how God answers prayer when He does answer this? In His own time, on His own terms, right? God's not a genie in a lamp that you get to come out and answer your wish right immediately. He works according to His time. He is the master, not us, right? You know, we're asking request of Him, and He delights to be one who answers, but He gets glory out of doing that in His own way, not the other way around. Do you remember Job and the whole event of Job, where Job goes through all the trials, and yet he's crying out to God, and God's not answering? He says the heavens are like a brass. He's not even hearing. It's just bouncing off the sky, not even coming back. And when God finally does show up at the end of this whole thing, He basically runs over Job and says, Job, who do you think you are to be able to tell me what I'm supposed to do? We have to be reminded of that sometimes, don't we? That it's not ours. It's not our ability. It's not we running the show. It's God running the show. Okay? And that's the way to remember it. What prompted Rebekah's question in verse 22? Look at 22. It says, children struggled within her, and she said, if it be so, why am I thus? I guess we read the answer, but what is the answer? She's got a pregnancy that's very difficult that she's going through. The children are struggling within her. And again, she's never had children before, but do you think maybe she might have talked to some other ladies that might have had children saying, is this normal? Two babies kind of struggling on the inside. Yeah, who knows what's actually going on exactly in that, but it's enough that it's causing great difficulty to her, right? She's feeling this, and so she goes to God, inquires of the Lord, just like Isaac did, inquires of the Lord, and she gets an answer from God. And this is quite an amazing, this is a prophecy that ends up being fulfilled way in the future that God gives as an answer. And what is the answer? There's actually kind of a two-part answer here given. There's two nations in your womb. What do we know them to be? We know one's going to be obviously Israel, okay? Israel that comes out of Jacob's line. Anybody know who comes out of Esau's line? What'd you say? Not Egypt. Egypt's already there. They become an enemy to the people of Israel. Yeah, the Edomites. And I'll show you that in a little bit. We'll see that before the chapter's out, actually. Edom. The Edomites come out of Esau, okay? And they're another nation. So we got two nations coming out of this womb. And what else do we know about them? One's going to be stronger than the other. Anybody know which one's going to be stronger than the other? No. It's the other way around. The younger or the older serves the younger. Actually, that's the opposite is the normal way, right? It's usually the younger serves the elder, but the opposite is the way is that the elder is going to serve the younger. Now, if you were to look at the difference between the two when they do come out, one kind of seems more meekly and the other seems more manly. One dwells in tents and likes to cook. The other one likes to be outside and hunt. Which one would you say seems to be more manly, the hunter or the house cleaner? Yeah, the hairy one.
Yeah, and so on the surface, they don't look the same. They're completely opposite of each other in almost every way. But which one's going to be the stronger? It's not going to be Esau, it's going to be Jacob. And it's not necessarily right at this point. It's in the future that we're talking about. We're looking at future prophecy here. One's going to be stronger than the other. And in the intent, why is this a prophecy? It's not talking about the strength of the nation in the sense of how many people they got, how many horses they've got, how big an army they have, how much money they've got. It's talking about something spiritual. What is the spiritual application here? That which line is this process going to happen? We saw Abraham, it goes to Isaac, then it's going to go through Jacob or Esau. Which one? Jacob. Yeah, well, but it's Jacob. We'll talk about that next week. We will get to that in a minute. Not this week, but next week. So, all right. So you kind of got the idea here? That's the idea, is that the one that's going to have the spiritual strength is the one that will be the Messiah's line. And by the way, we could say physically, which one will survive longer, which one does? The line of Jacob does. Esau's line, the Edomites disappear. They're gone. You know, if you, anybody ever heard of over there in Jordan, that big city that's built in the rock, Petra? That's part of the Edomites' reign. That big wall that's built in, I mean, it's beautiful. If you ever, I think it's been used in several different movies, that wall front has been used. But it's over there in Jordan. It was stayed hidden for a long time. It wasn't discovered till the 1900s. It had kept hidden. People kept it hidden. They didn't want people to find it. And finally somebody pretended to be somebody else and went in and found it and made it public to the world. And it's this ancient city of people that were rock dwellers that lived in that area, and they actually traced the peoples that made this to the Edomites. It's quite an interesting story. And by the way, what they were known for is they lived out in the desert, but they were known to be able to harvest all the water, and they had pipes. They piped in everywhere, and they had these big pools. They said it was like Las Vegas, you know, out in the desert, and you have all this water right here. They're able to channel it all the way in. And then they said they sold, get this now, they were high in gold. They had lots of gold in the area, but they sold myrrh and frankincense. Anybody got any idea where that story comes from? The wise men came bringing gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, I'm not saying they were Edomites. I'm just saying that it's very possible they stopped along the way and got some of that. So, or they collected that because it was a value just like it was of the Edomites, okay? All right. That's history that's gone. All right. When Esau comes out, how's he described when he's born? He's red and hairy. So they give him the name Esau. Anybody know what the name Esau means? It means hairy. Means hairy. Okay? Or rough is the name also. Jacob, he's born, and when he's born, what's he doing when he's coming out? He's holding onto the heel of Esau. What an interesting story that is. He's holding onto the heel. What does his name mean? Means heel grabber or supplanter, trickster. You think about a heel grabber, someone walking down a pathway and someone reaches out and grabs him by the heel, knocks him over, right? That's the idea. He's a trickster. He's always looking to take his older brother down. And we're going to see that here in just a moment. This conflict shows up. Now, added to the conflict is something to go on with the parents. They further the conflict between these two boys. How do they do that? They show favoritism. Who favors Esau? Isaac does. Why? Because he's a man and he likes to eat his deer steak, right? Who knows? You know what? It sounds like probably Esau would cook it normally because Esau was supposed to bring it to his dad. This is what we'll see next week. And Esau did bring it without Rebekah's help. So he might have cooked it, or he might have been married. Who knows? And his wife did it. I don't know. He kind of gets married. He gets married at a later point, but I don't know if the timing is kind of switched in the Bible or not. How they kind of group some things together, I don't know for sure. Anyways, how did I get caught off on that one? All right. And who favors Jacob? Mother. Why does she favor Jacob? It's not because he's a tent boy. Why does she favor him? Because God promised that the younger would be the master and the elder would serve the younger. And she's favoring him because of the prophecy. Isaac's favoring him basically because of carnal reasons. Now, are they either one right in what they're doing? No. Neither one are right because they use it against each other the whole time. Marriage is not supposed to be a divided thing where you got the two hate each other because of the way they favor one child over the other. That is not the way it's supposed to be. And they end up hurting this whole situation in the process. Yeah. Now, do you think Isaac knew the prophecy? I guarantee you he knew the prophecy. But it doesn't make it right. Just because she heard it, they weren't supposed to handle it that way. Now, this is a whole other marriage conversation that we could have, but we're not going to continue on. But you get the idea. They are adding further conflict to the matter. They already are against each other from the very beginning. Mom and Dad add to it by favoring both sides, favoring one side and then the other side. Okay? And that's going to play out here in just a moment. Now, let me ask you some questions. So give me some parallels that we've seen between Abraham and Sarah and now Isaac and Rebekah. Both couldn't have children for a time. Both of them sought God for the answer of the promise. And eventually both got the answer, didn't they? But it took a long time in waiting. There might be some other parallels. Anybody got any others? Do you think there happened to be any bit of favoritism played in Abraham's family? Abraham did want Ishmael for a while, didn't he? And it was hard for him when Ishmael was thrust out of the family. But I don't know that there was favoritism necessarily over one over the other, because it does appear that Abraham embraces Isaac too. Yeah, he believed. Isaac doesn't. He has a problem with this. Why would God pick my little weakly, feminine son to be the promised line? Maybe that's what I'm just thinking that way. I'm reading in between the lines, but I'm thinking that must have been his mindset. Why would he pick this one? This weakly, likes to stay intense, cook. What's wrong with him? Why can't my son be tough? And so then he went for the tough one, right? You know, I'm just thinking. I may be wrong. I may be really reading into it. But I'm thinking from a carnal perspective, that's probably what's going on. He likes Isaac because Isaac likes Esau because Esau's a hunter and Esau can bring in the beef, venison. Huh? That is true. That is true. You remember that the people of Israel picked Saul to be their king because he was strong. Yeah. Do people have a tendency to do that? To make their choices not based on God's wisdom, but based on outward appearance? Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Even Samuel started to do that, didn't he? He went for the oldest of Jesse's sons rather than picking that little runt of a boy out in the field. And God had to remind him that God looks on the inward heart, not the outward appearance, right? Yeah.
Okay. According to the custom of time, what was promised to the firstborn? Huh? The birthright. What's the birthright? What does that mean? I'm going to give it to you. Is it just the inheritance? Okay, let's look at it. Look over at Deuteronomy 21:17. This will give you a little bit of a definition of what the firstborn was promised. Deuteronomy 21:17. Deuteronomy 21:17. In fact, if you start at verse 15 through 17, I'll read it out loud, and you can hear it. He's talking about if a man has two wives, and, in that case, that's another story. We'll deal with that eventually. He says, if a man have two wives, one beloved and the other hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn, therefore the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn, by giving him, here it is, a double portion of all that he hath. For he is the beginning of his strength, the right of the firstborn is his. So what does the right of the firstborn mean? You get a double portion over the other. It doesn't mean that the other one doesn't get it part of the inheritance, but the firstborn gets the double portion, which means if you're going to split up your inheritance, and say you got two boys, split up your inheritance, you're going to split it three ways, if you will, and you're going to take two of those ways to the firstborn and the other left over for the second. Or if you got a bunch of kids, you're going to have to do that multiple times, but give double portion to the firstborn. That's the way they did it. Does that make sense? You never got double portion? But that was their culture. Why did they do that? Because the firstborn became, he said here, because he's the beginning of his strength, the firstborn takes the family leadership role as well. And he has that kind of a status right off the bat whenever he inherits. He's got it not only financially, has more than all the rest, but he represents the strength of the family, so he's the leader of that family when Dad passes off the scene. See, it's not like we do today where they just kind of ran off and did their own thing and became their own families. They may have had that, but for the most part, they were family cultured. They hung together. They stayed together. And when the father passed off the scene, the one who took over the clan, if you will, the leadership, was the firstborn. Does that make sense? And that's the way it is demonstrated. Now, that doesn't mean that never happened, because Esau goes away and starts his own clan. Ishmael obviously has been pushed away, and he starts his own clan, and so forth. So we do see that does happen, but for the most part, in this family line, that's how it's presented. Well, yeah, but he comes back to basically take over, as you'll see, when he does come back into the land of Israel, to kind of re-inherit the promises. And guess who he has to deal with when he comes back? He's got to deal with Esau. And it works out actually a lot better than he expected, as we'll see. Yeah. Okay, so that's the idea when we talk about firstborn, is the double portion. Okay? Now, let me just give a little bit of a thought for a moment when we talk about prayer, just because this is something that was brought up into here. They both prayed, both sought after God's leadership. In Luke 18, it talks about there's a parable that Jesus tells. We're not going to get into the whole parable, but the very first line, he says that men ought always to pray and not to faint. One of the things we need to remember is that prayer doesn't automatically get answered on the first time you ask. That's why we ought always to pray and not to faint, not to give up praying. How many times have you been discouraged over the fact that you felt like you prayed and you didn't get the answer? Does that happen quite often? Yeah. Has anybody ever seen answer to prayer in their life? Where you've seen that?
Now, that happens sometimes, but does that happen every day? Not all the time, does it? And we're kind of left saying, God, I asked this before, why aren't you answering? God, I asked this before, why aren't you answering? God, I asked this before, why aren't you answering? I mean, I do that all the time. I especially do that for our people here at the church. God, I'm praying for a certain family or a certain person or whatever in the church, and why is it you're not doing anything on their behalf? I had one Sunday night after church, I was so discouraged because of that. I stayed here till like 1 or 2 in the morning after church, just talking to God about it and pouring out my heart, yelling at times to God, saying, God, I don't know that you really care. Anyone ever been in that place? And just frustrated over some things that were going on. It was a few months back, but that happens. You know, we go through those struggles in our heart where we're, God, please help this. Yes, sir. So let's look at some principles. Let me read you some verses, principles that I think are good for us to remember when it comes to praying. 1, be persistent. Be persistent. Don't stop praying just because you didn't get an answer the first time. Keep praying. Until you know that God says no more, and you say, how do I know that? Well, maybe you might find a verse in the Bible that says this shouldn't be what you're seeking. Anyway, there are things like that we don't always know what we should pray, and then we find the answer. Or it could be that God gives you a clear understanding in your own heart that I'm done, I don't need to ask anymore. Don't stop praying until you get an answer. Okay? Some other things to consider. Psalm 66:18 says, if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. What's that mean? No, not necessarily. If I don't deal with my sin, if I keep holding on to my own sin, even from my heart, that's the idea, from my inside, we're not just talking about something I'm doing out over here, but just even the desire of it, holding on to it from my heart, the Lord will not hear me. So what can keep God from listening to you? A heart that's in love with sin, right? Proverbs 28:9. He that turneth away his ear from hearing the law, even his prayer shall be an abomination. What's the law? It's the Word of God. Lack of obedience to this book can keep God from answering your prayer. You know what He's telling you to be doing, and you're living in disobedience, and then you have the audacity to go and ask Him to answer something for you. He says, even your prayer will be an abomination to God. You know what something abominable is? Go out to your backyard after your dog got done doing his business and pick it up with your hands. That's abominable. You get what I'm talking about? That's what God is saying, how He looks at our prayer when we come that way, with a disobedient life. Okay? Isaiah 1:15. When you spread forth your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Spread forth your hands, meaning in prayer. When you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. What's He saying there? Yeah, a sin-filled life, hands full of blood, evil hands, or hands that are doing mischief, disobedience, sinful life. Okay, Isaiah 59:1-2. Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, neither His ear heavy that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid His face from you that He will not hear. Okay. So sin can be a big blocker, can't it? So the attitude that we need to have whenever it comes to, I want to have prayer, I want to have God answer prayers. 1, be persistent, because that's not always the issue. You got sin is the keeping you from getting your prayers answered. Persistence, the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. But the idea is that it's not, I prayed one time and it got my answer. It's I continually pray and pray and pray. Okay, second, strive for holiness in your life. Have some confession of sin. You know, we talked about confession. Doesn't mean, Lord, if I've sinned, please forgive me. It's confessing means naming it to God. This is what I am, And when you're confessing, not just naming, there's the intent that I'm letting go, not regarding it anymore in my heart, not holding on to it anymore. Does that make sense? Humility. Admitting that you're wrong to God. That's hard for prideful people, isn't it? And repentance, okay? So those are things that we need to think about when it comes to prayer. Now, I know this whole lesson isn't about prayer, but that's what we do see, is that they both had to seek after God, and obviously both got an answer from God, but it took some time to get the answer, okay? All right, let's look at the last part of this lesson. This is real quick. We only got 5 verses here, 29 to 34. Who wants to get that? Let's finish it out. This will be the last part. Okay, Darla. Okay, so here's a last part. Esau's out in the field hunting. Obviously, he's been out for a long time. He's to the point of exhaustion, and he's coming back to the home, and guess what he smells? Pot of beans, right? Smells good. He's been cooking over the campfire. Smells good. And Esau says, "Hey, brother, let me have a pot of that. Let me have a bowl of those beans. Let me have some of your stew that you're cooking." And Jacob, what does he do? His little conniving self do? Yeah, sell me your birthright in exchange. You can have you can have this pot of stew. I'll give you the whole pot, but you give me your birthright. You give me your birthright. Remember what the birthright is? The double portion and the promise to be the heir. The promise to be the Lord of the home now. Okay? That's what this idea is. All right? And what does Esau do? He's willing to sell it for a bowl of soup. In fact, it says that in the passage, he makes this exaggerated statement, "I'm at the point to die. I got to have this soup now." You think there's a little bit of exaggeration, maybe? Yeah, I'm at the point to die. You've been out hunting for the day, and you're at the point to die. All right. You've been hanging around with the bears too much or something. I don't know. Got swiped a few times. So he says, "And what will this birthright profit me if I die?" So it really doesn't matter. So the passage says Esau despised his birthright. Now here, get this. It's double portion, meaning obviously he's going to get physical inheritance, but he's also demonstrating he doesn't understand this and this, what the lineage issue and the Messiah promise. Presently, according to Dad and to his birth, he's part of the line. He is the heir of promise, even though God has already said that's not how it's going to work out. Presently, because of birthright, he's in that order. But he demonstrates it by an evil heart, despising it, and gives it to Jacob. Now, does Jacob have a good heart? Now, you're going to find out Jacob's not any better than he is. In fact, the very fact of what he's doing right now demonstrates he's not any better than his brother. He's only sees it as physical inheritance, most likely at this point. Yeah, well, I would think they would know that. I'm pretty sure they would understand that. It's possible. We don't know. Yeah. But he got them to swear and do some kind of an oath, and people keep their promise, don't they? They're supposed to when they make that. We already looked about the importance of making an oath.
The book of Hebrews actually makes a comment about this event that played out. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 through 17, it tells us that Esau was a profane person willing to sell this. And he was willing to sell this honor, this wealth, this privilege for a bowl of beans. That's how low he degraded the promised lineage. Does he even demonstrate he's got a heart for the whole Messiah thing? Not even close. He didn't even have a heart for his own inheritance, physical inheritance that's promised to him just because he came out moments before his other brother did. And so he despises it. And then in the text it makes a note here that he sees this red bowl of stew, and they called him Edom as a result of that. Now, it sort of kind of plays in with the fact he came out red and hairy, but he gets the name Edom, and that's how you get the Edomites that come out of that line. They connect it to this very event of selling your birthright. I don't remember what all their relationship is, but they were never friends with Israel. They always called him. If you'll read in the minor prophets, you'll see that there's I think it's Obadiah that actually deals with the Edomites when they're being judged, and it says whenever Babylon came against the nation of Israel, specifically against Judah, the southern kingdom, when they came, the Edomites actually stood in the way and prevented them from escaping, so that Nebuchadnezzar could take them. And God went after them, said, "You're going to fall for what you did to my people when they were trying to escape. You stood and you pointed out, here they are, right there." They carried that hatred for them all the way to the end. And their name reflected Esau's despising of his birthright. And they never forgot it. Now, what does Edom mean? It means red. They were the people of the red beans. The red beans. All right? So are things beginning to actually play out exactly the way God said? Yeah, where the elder shall serve the younger. Well, the elder has already given up his elder rights. And soon enough, the elder will eventually be completely gone from the rights that he did have. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and pray. We are coming to the end here. I'm going to ask Wayne if you'll close us in prayer for this time.